Welcome to The Switch, not another podcast. The Switch is a collaboration between Baseload Capital and DNB, aiming to accelerate the green transition. We want our podcast to be a central hub for knowledge exchange within the fields of renewables and green transition. Hosted by Kristina Hagström-Ilevska and produced by Emil and Jacob.
Welcome back to yet another episode of The Switch, not another podcast. The podcast where we discuss and talk about the renewable solutions that are already out there that can help you make the switch. We will entertain you, we will educate you, and we will ask all those curious questions that you have in your mind. Today we have a guest who will talk about boating again.
Yeah,
Emil, Jacob, Are you excited?
Very excited, thank you.
Yeah, very excited.
What are you curious about?
I'm curious about, my dad has a boat, and my mom and dad has a boat, and he has experimented a lot with HVO. It's like a biofuel, I think. I don't have so much knowledge about it, but I think our guest has a lot of knowledge about biofuels overall.
Definitely, I think he has,
Jacob?
Yes, I'm curious about, you could say KarlOskar is in the business of disrupting a sector. Those kind of disruption of a sector, it usually takes a lot of behavioral change. So I'm curious about how they plan to change behaviors and attitudes amongst these pleasure boaters out there.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting thing to move into because, as you said, there are pleasure boaters out there, and to change behaviors for them, it's even more difficult because you're actually making things more difficult. But I'm very much curious because I think that they have a solution which actually makes it easy to be. And I also think that they have a solution that actually makes us do the switch already now.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious about how they're going to roll it out because it's still a fairly small company that has a great idea. And I'm like, what's their vision? Where do they want to go? And is it a global rollout?
I don't know. But now we are talking, we all three know who the guest is and what we are talking about. But we are teasing the audience a lot right now. Shouldn't we roll into the intro?
Let's do that. I think it is time. Here you go.
He is a former marketing executive that spent over 25 years in B2C and half of that time at Samsung. In 2019, he founded Fossil Free Marine, and they develop infrastructure solutions that enables the transition to sustainable boating, both distribution of renewable drop-in biofuels and, further down the line, fast charging station for electric boats. Our guest is a handyman, a lover of Stockholm archipelago, and an alpine skier. Let's give a warm switch welcome to Karl-Oskar Tjernström.
I'm so happy to have you here, Karl-Oskar, at The Switch.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. How are you today?
Awesome.
Great. Let's move right into it because you have such an amazing story about the company that we're going to speak of today.
Yeah.
How did it start?
Well, it actually started, like a lot of other things in my life as a coincidence. I came home a late December evening in 2018 with a huge, big, mighty Land Rover Defender that I'd
Sounds very sustainable.
Not at the time. I've always wanted one of those. Kind of brings back fond memories from Africa, I guess. But, like you said, that wasn't very popular among the crowd at home, asking what does this thing run on. So I started experimenting with different types of biofuels. First, I ran what's called Premium Evolution, which is 50% pine tree oil. Obviously, worked beautifully. And then I went online and got into some Land Rover forums in the UK. Found some Land Rover enthusiasts that went around to restaurants collecting old used cooking oil, running their Defenders on that. And I'm reasonably handy, so I figured, if it can run on that, it can probably run on anything. So I tried HVO.
For the audience, to make sure that everybody understands, what is HVO?
So HVO, the abbreviation stands for hydro-treated vegetable oil. Some countries use the term XTL, so X to liquid, so it's a specific gasification process. So essentially, it's what's called a renewable diesel. So it's a chemical replica of diesel, just made from renewable feedstocks and renewable sources. So you can make it from everything, from like I said, pine tree oil to used cooking oil, other types of residue.
Amazing what we already have existing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
First, I put in 10 liters just to make sure. And after a couple of days, I realized it actually ran much, much better. It was cleaner, better pickup, no smoke, no smell. And then after about a month, I realized, hey, I have a fossil-free Defender. Why am I any worse from an environmental perspective than the guy who goes and buys a brand new Tesla? And I think that, kind of got my marketing brain spinning, and that ended up becoming Fossil-Free Marine.
I think that's pretty epic in a sense, to find a gap and then to start to produce something around it. Can you tell us about the product itself or the service that you're offering? So
the first product we're about to commercialize now is a big floating unmanned mobile fuel station. So if you look at it from a distance, it looks a bit like your existing fuel stations for boats, marine fuel stations. But under the shell, it has nothing to do with those. It's built out of composite, and it's really built to be unmanned. And above all, it's built to comply with all environmental and safety standards that you could imagine. So most of them are taken from the land-based fuel sector, and we just applied them to the marine sector. And what that does is that enables us to get deliveries directly from the fuel companies that produce and distribute the biofuels. So that's kind of what we're unlocking in the value chain. Because right now, they completely refuse to deliver to the old marine stations because they're in such a poor condition and so big environmental hazards.
You actually even mentioned that the old fuel stations are fewer and fewer. Are these going to replace?
I think it's going to be a combination of, like I said, we have roughly half in Sweden now. We did maybe 20 years ago. No exact numbers, but we think we had maybe 450, 500 stations some 20 years ago, and there's 220 today. So I think it will be a combination of new ones being put in perhaps better locations from a logistical perspective, but also some will be replaced, of course.
And hopefully those will be replaced with your products then.
That's what we hope, yes.
That's what we hope.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about the vision you have for the company?
I've always, I guess that's how my brain works. I've always had big visions for a lot of things, in the past as well. Sometimes they get realized, sometimes not. But my vision is to be a global leader in infrastructure for boats. Not just liquid fuels, but also electrification down the road.
So this is actually the next export we're going to do?
That's what we hope, yes.
Yeah. How far along are you?
We're building the first one now. It's a big 24-meter behemoth being built at a shipyard down on the west coast for deployment here in Stockholm this summer. So
this summer, I will be able to fill up my boat?
Yes. Roughly second week of August, we'll have it operational in Lidingö.
Wow, that's good.
That's very cool.
That's cool. Guys, do you boat?
Yeah, I would love to visit your, can you call it a fuel station, or do you have another name for it?
Depends on, what language you're using. There was a Swedish journalist who referred to it as a miljömack, environmental station, and I think that has a nice connotation, nice ring to it, because it's not just about delivering sustainable fuels. It's also about how we store them, how we distribute them. We have black water collection, so you can empty your black water tank and so on, septic tank.
Yeah,
you will fuel there.
Yeah, of course I will.
We can go there and have a fueling party.
Yeah. Summer activity.
Summer activity.
I like that. Fueling party.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah.
But it's interesting. The concept is cool. You have a gap. But how far away are you from the vision right now?
Obviously, we need to get the first one operational. I think and we've said for a couple of years that's when people will understand what we've been up to. I think that's when our customers will understand. Our customers are let's say, long-term are the major fuel companies. We haven't developed this to sell it to individual resellers. We've really developed it to meet the need of a very, very discerning customer base, which is the major international fuel companies.
Which actually brings me into the next question. Like, what are the main obstacles in commercializing this and the sustainable boating in general?
I think for us there's one obstacle, and that's luckily I think that's something I've been dealing with most of my life, is trying to convince management teams and boards of big companies to change their strategy, because that's really what we're facing. The fuel companies left this sector 20 years ago, divested their equipment, and obviously it will take some time for them to revert that decision and decide to go back.
What do you mean they left it?
Well, let's say up until the early 2000s, these stations used to be owned by the companies. So here in Sweden, it would be Circle K or Preem or the likes of those, or Shell. But they saw this coming 20 years ago and decided to just leave this sector because there was too much risk involved with distributing and storing fuels in these old stations. So most of the ones you see out in the archipelago today, someone bought them for 1 krona.
Really?
Yeah, because they just wanted to get, the liability and the environmental risk at not just 1 or maybe 2 arm's length distance.
Well, what's the consequence of that then?
Well, the consequences are essentially that the marine sector is blocked out from the transition that we're seeing in road transport over into renewable fuels. So those fuels just are off the map for boats today.
I know you even told me that 53% is fueled from a can.
Yeah, it's a bizarre number. I managed to get hold of data from the Swedish Transport Agency, the research they did last year or 2020, showing the environmental impact of pleasure boats. So they looked at the fuel consumption across all of Sweden, and 53% and that's in boats over 6 meters. So it's not your average little dinghy. It's really family day boats. More than half of the fuel is fueled in cans, not in a marine station. So it equates to something like 19 million liters that are
circled around
in cars, in the trunk of a car.
Imagine what would happen if there would be a car crash or anything like that.
Yeah.
That would be enormous consequences.
Yeah, and this is something I don't think even politicians are quite aware of it.
That is really a scary number. And isn't it also that it's like, is it legally to transport?
No, there's a legal limit to 40 liters, and I would be very surprised if everyone sticks to that.
Yeah, going back and forth to the fuel.
Yeah, and now you look at the S-curve for electric cars. It kind of makes the picture even more bizarre. Imagine someone coming to their boat club in the Tesla with 60, 80, 100 liters of gas in the car.
That would not happen. Guys, you're laughing behind the cameras now. Yeah. Is it shocking?
Yeah, it's a shocking image. It is.
Exactly, it's a bizarre picture you're painting.
Yeah.
Did you even have a clue?
No, not that it was so much boats that were fueled from cans.
No.
But I have a question regarding your biofuel. What kind of fuel do you fill up your boat with on your station?
So it's actually not my biofuel. So we take the fuels delivered from big fuel companies like Neste, for instance, one of our most important partners. So the one that's most common now is called HVO, so HVO 100, which is a renewable diesel that complies with the same, what's called EN standards as a normal diesel. So you can run it in any diesel-powered boat or car, obviously. But then we have just around the corner, we have biogasoline. So actually, I ran my boat on biogasoline back in September last year. Managed to get my hold of, I carried it in cans. Because it wasn't available, I just wanted to try it. I guess that's kind of how I work. If something should work, I want to try it.
And it did work?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
The biogasoline, that one was 78% renewable, of which 10% ethanol. But it's the same thing with that as the HVO. It complies with the same EN standards. So chemically and physically, it will behave the same way as a conventional fossil version of that same fuel.
If you look at the future of the marine, we're talking about should it be electrified and so on. I guess that is not going to happen tomorrow. Is this the product that you are delivering? Is that in between, or do you think that the trend goes towards that we will be all electrical, or will we be?
I mean, that's one of the questions I think the whole boating industry is struggling with, and I think there are several aspects to it. For one, I think we need to make the switch right now if we can, and not just talk about, let's do things by 2040, 2050, because there are so many things that we can actually do now to mitigate climate change. And to me, it's very obvious. If we can just get renewable fuels out to boats and run them on that, rather than switching not just driveline but maybe boats. If you think about the CO2 impact of building a new boat, that needs to be recouped somehow. And then if you look at how few hours a boat is run compared to a car, it's really hard to make the numbers make sense. I think with the technology we have right now.
So do you mean that in the end, we need to wait it out? So the boats that we already have there, if we would exchange all of them, that would be a bigger CO2 impact than if we would just use them and use better fuel? And
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you run those numbers and it's going to be very obvious. Because I usually start my investor pitches saying, let's face it, in Sweden alone, we have 600,000 pleasure boats. In the US, there are over 16 million. Electrifying them all will take a lifetime, and we don't have that time. I mean, obviously, that's quite melodramatic, but I think that paints a picture of the sheer amount of boats that somehow, if we envisage them being electrified, the amount of boats that need to be replaced. And compared to a car, you don't have the same kind of business case. For commercial traffic, whole different story. I'm talking pleasure boats here. But you don't have the same business case like you do with a car that you use for daily transport, A to B, where you can crunch the numbers yourself and realize that it is actually cheaper to run an electric car in many ways. For boats, I just don't see the same numbers adding up.
Because it actually brings us into one of our, disruptive questions here.
Now it's time for the disruptive questions.
Do you compete with other sustainable solutions? We had X-Shore here a couple of months ago, and my question is e-boating competing with you?
Not at all. Not in any way. I usually say, and I think this is one of the things I love about being in sustainability nowadays, is that everyone who's in it doesn't compete, because we all understand that we need all solutions. We don't need all solutions at the same time in the same place for the same kind of application, but we need them all. So there's place for electrification, there's place for hybrid, there's place for renewable fuels, hydrogen, you name it. We need it all. And I think for us, as a small startup, maybe lagging slightly behind the likes of X-Shore and Candela in our commercial rollout, they really help make people understand that boating is a serious problem. And it kind of shines a light on that problem.
And what you actually offer them, which I like, is to be able to make a switch to something better already now. Yeah. So not waiting, but actually switching now.
Yeah, so we usually talk about it as a today solution, which is kind of a concept I like.
Lovely. If I would have like an awesome button here, then I would push that.
Shouldn't that be on the other side?
We'll do like this, or we'll do like this. You agree, guys? Yeah, there you go. You get a nod from the boys behind the cameras here. Yeah. Listen, I'm curious a little bit about you. You have an interesting story, and if we get started here, you actually grew up in Africa, Tanzania.
Yeah, I started school in Dar es Salaam, in Tanzania, in an international school. So I spent almost 3 years there.
What did you bring with you from that part of your life into your business today?
I think one of the things you really learn, and this is why I think everyone should try to experience different cultures, is you learn to rely on yourself in a different way. I think. So I'm not saying it builds some kind of massive confidence in a way, but you kind of you get to understand that there's always a way around. There's always a way of fixing things or getting by.
Can you get an example?
No, but I mean, I know we talked about this earlier. My parents sent me home alone, unaccompanied from Dar es Salaam, all the way up to Rudsjö, which is on the border between Jämtland and Ångermanland, really far up in northern Sweden, to my grandparents.
There are a couple of flights.
There are a few flights, and let's say this was the early '80s, which says how old I actually am. But you know, there was a lot of flights, and people picking me up at airports. You know, my uncle picked me up in Stockholm, and then had me over the night, and then he sent me away up north, and then someone else picked me up, and there was a train, and there was a taxi the last way, and no cell phones, no nothing.
Imagine a life without a cell phone.
I mean, I think today, I mean, if imagine sending your 7-year-old away just over to ICA to buy something, to the grocery store. You go like, when does he come back? It's been off. It's been over 20 minutes.
Let me check the GPS.
Yeah, exactly.
But do you believe, because I'm curious, because you have a drive and your history and your experience. Do you think that we have too little trust in order to create the business we need, if we bring it back to work life today?
I mean, and I usually say this, I'm a firm believer that technology can solve mankind's biggest problems. We have the technology. It's just a matter of, I think, politicians giving business a bit more freedom, not trying to control things in terms of trying to direct or divert attention to specific types of technologies. I think they should, encourage everything to be technology neutral, and let business run with it.
How do you connect that to the trust?
No, because I mean, it's a question of believing that we have the solutions and that we can do it. We as mankind can do it if we want to.
Do you believe in the switch? Do you believe that we can do what we need to do in order?
Yes.
What do you base that on?
No, sheer numbers. I think we have the technology. There is enough capital in the world to make this change happen if we just decide to. No doubt about it. So
why don't we? How come it goes so slow?
Because I think part of it is human behavior, and part of it is maybe focusing on the wrong things and not fully understanding, how this kind of switch will happen at a consumer level. In a behavioral sense, and what we need to make that happen.
What do you think needs to be happening? I mean, you have experience from many years in Samsung, which is really a consumer business in a sense. How do we change behavior in people in order for them to do the switch?
Well, I mean, the key thing, and this I usually talk about this in terms of marketing. The key thing is understanding behavior. Because marketing is human psychology. If you don't understand why people do what they do, how can you ever make them do what you want them to do? So and I think it's about being curious, being humble, and maybe perhaps bringing in the right types of competencies in this kind of transition.
Do you think we are marketing the needed switch in a bad way? To give you an example, I think that we scare people quite a lot. But I mean, you are in an industry, we need to change behaviors. We need people to go to the right gas station to fuel. I mean, it's not a big change, but it's still a hard change to do. Yeah. Like you have your route, you're going with your boat, and you usually stop there to fuel your boat, but now you have to fuel somewhere else. And how do you change this behavior?
I mean, it's yes and no. I think maybe, and again, I think there are a lot of politicians that believe that scare tactics are the right way. We need to paint a picture of the world, becoming a desert. And at the same time, when you understand how you make changes in behavior, part of it is also carrots and the encouragement. And for instance, the reductions that Sweden has done in terms of greenhouse gas emissions over the past years, that's kind of just swept under the carpet. No one talks about it.
No, we shouldn't pull that. What do you mean?
No, but and that is bullshit.
That is bullshit.
Yeah,
there we go. So push it.
Bullshit.
I got it.
No, because I mean, we need to acknowledge the fact that we are making progress. How can you otherwise, as a consumer, feel that I'm being part of the switch? I'm making it happen. And that's not only about tracking the amount of sales of EVs and those kind of metrics. It's also about the sheer numbers of CO2 emissions.
I'm happy you pushed the button, because that was basically what I was after a little bit as well. I mean, you're in an industry where it's pleasure, and pleasure is difficult to change behaviors because you're enjoying it. So changing a habit in this would mean that I might have to enjoy it less, or?
No, but at the same time, I think, again, it will just require a different type of strategy and different communication. I think, I'm not talking about all boat owners, but I think most boat owners, they love the nature. They love the archipelago. They love the ocean. That's part of it. And if you just make them understand that the way they're boating today isn't sustainable, they're actually destroying the nature that they love. I think that will be an easier switch, because it's much more tangible than perhaps behavior when it comes to aviation or something else that's just harder to kind of put a finger on.
I'll call you on that one. Because I think that there are one part of the boaters out there that are really the way you're explaining it. But I also think that there are some parts of the boating industry which has a lot to do with status and and showing off in a sense.
Yeah.
And I feel that it's a polarization between these two.
That's actually, and I think that again, that's part of the strategy, and also for us when it comes to identifying the right partners to work with. And I was last week I was down in Gothenburg and talked to Volvo Penta's commercial management team, and I think essentially my message there was the same. You guys in part they actually gave me the idea in part. For my whole business, which kind of was an anecdote, but still. But they play an important part in telling consumers what they should do. And the way they push their product roadmap and the way they push their marketing strategy will help consumers understand what to do. And I think as an example of the opposite, like you said, I think the US is a massive issue, massive issue, where we have companies, promoting not just 1 and 2, but 4 or 5 or 6 outboards on a boat, which is just bizarre. And I think the companies that push that to drive their own sales, I think that will bite them in the tail eventually.
I hope that you're right. I want to push the awesome button on that, because I hope that you're right, that we are actually feeding a generation and people a behavior that is actually not okay with doing that.
No, and that's I usually say that part as a joke, but part serious. That there will come a day where my kids will point at my boat and say, Dad, that fossil rocket thing isn't cool anymore. We're not going. You can go yourself.
I hope that. I long for that.
Yeah, no, I mean that will eventually happen someday, and that's what we're trying to mitigate.
Lovely. That's a vision I live with dearly. Listen, I'm curious about even more about you. We have the conscious questions. Are you ready?
Now it's time for conscious questions.
Tell us, what have you done for the climate this week? What have you seen done stupid to the climate, or do you have any guilty pleasures?
Okay, what have I done for the climate this week? Well, I'm trying to sell more fuel stations. I think that's what I do for the climate this week.
But that's too easy.
That was boring.
Yeah.
Okay, that was boring. No, apart from that, I haven't been in my car all week. I think that's good.
That's good.
Yeah.
How do you commute? Walk or?
I use my electric scooter. I have my own since 4 years.
Good. On another personal note, I'm the girl who has the house in the Swedish mountains. It's a village called Åre. And we travel there every now and then. It's an 8-hour drive. And on the way, there is a place called Tunnebro. Yeah, exactly. You know it.
Yep.
That place is nowadays, it's pretty famous because there is a long
There's an
queue.
EV bottleneck.
Exactly, of Teslas standing in line. How do we make sure that in the future we don't get the same situation in the archipelago, so that we have like bottlenecks where you can the only places where we can fuel in a good way, or we can fill up the batteries and so on. How do we make Sandhamn, which is like the big place?
Yes, Sandhamn is one of my favorite topics when it comes to charging infrastructure.
Sandhamn being one of the archipelagos in the Swedish.
It's an island.
Popular.
It's an island pretty far out. It's 35 nautical miles from Stockholm, so it's quite far out, but hugely popular. I mean, restaurants, hotels, spa, and whatnot. The challenge there is not just about making the charging happen in terms of chargers, but also the grid. So it's a remote island, and obviously the grid isn't prepared. Actually, like the grid, even in on land, isn't prepared for high-speed charging at all places. But there, definitely, we're talking probably. I talked to the owner of the grid, and they said, well, if we get actually a request now, we could have the grid upgraded in 7-8 years. So that's kind of time perspective, and I think that's one of the things
7-8 years in order to do what we actually need to do now.
To upgrade the grid to enable high-speed charging. Yes, and that's but that's a challenge, and I think. What it's also about is, and I think this is one of the things you learn when you work with tech, is that when you have an exponential development, you need to think further down the line and try to solve for that problem, because things happen so fast that there's no way you can solve today's problem only, because you need to look at what's tomorrow's problem. So I usually use X-Shore as an example that I believe. As batteries develop, we get better and better, higher and higher energy density. They will probably put bigger and bigger batteries in their boats, give more and more range, but they will need to be charged. And I think if we envisage Sandhamn some 3 to 5 years down the line, there's not going to be one X-Shore charging on a Saturday or Sunday lunch in July. It's going to
hopefully many.
Probably 8. And if they need 150 kilowatts each, that's 1.2 megawatts. So either people charge their boats or you get warm lunch. You're not going to get both.
Well, then Sandhamn is not going to be so popular anymore.
If you like salads and electric boats, yes.
So how do we solve this problem?
Well, we think we have technology to solve it. So we just need partners on board to make it happen.
Tell us.
Well, I mean, we need partners that want to be part of that. Let's call it the hen and egg issue, because same thing we had with EVs some 8 to 10 years ago, where people didn't quite dare to buy one because of range anxiety and because of the distance between chargers and so on. And the same is going to happen for boats if we don't start building charging infrastructure, and if we don't start building charging infrastructure for the future. Not trying to solve it here and now with 1 or 2 chargers here and there, because that doesn't solve the problem.
Is there a collaboration between different stakeholders within the marine industry? Here I'm thinking like boats and fuels and.
I mean, yes and no. I would like to have a much broader consensus on the problems we're trying to solve and the right partners on board.
But there is none today?
Not really, no.
We should fix that.
Yes, we should.
Yeah. So this is a call out to all the companies that are affecting the marine industry. Let's
do it.
Together a forum. I like that.
Yeah.
Put everybody together in the same room and just start discussing.
Exactly.
What kind of uncomfortable, I mean, you mentioned one here. What kind of uncomfortable conversations do we need to have in order to solve these issues?
I think there are a number of uncomfortable conversations we need to have. I mean, one is how do we actually make this infrastructure change happen, and which parties need to be on board, and how do we make the business cases make sense. I think that for the marine industry, I think there's an obvious link between commercial boating and pleasure boating. So, for instance, if we can get more and more commercial routes electrified, that will make the business cases happen for the charging infrastructure, and then we can just tag along the pleasure boats as well.
You're mentioning partnerships here. Which partners would you call on? who are the stakeholders that we need to bring in?
I mean, for us, the obvious partners are the fuel companies and the big driveline manufacturers. So the likes of Volvo Penta and Brunswick, for instance.
Will that be enough, or do we need additional parties to solve the?
I mean, for the charging infrastructure, we definitely need the big incumbents and stakeholders in the electricity business, power business.
What is there that the marine industry can learn from the car industry? I mean, they are a bit further along. Is there any things that we should actually steal from that and get started with this?
I mean, there's a lot of learnings. I usually talk about the electric car industry as and compare that to streaming, for instance, where there's so much to learn from how Spotify developed, for instance, and how Netflix developed. And the same, that Tesla did with the infrastructure. I think that's great for Tesla, but it's not great for the EV industry. So I think not letting one manufacturer of either drivelines or boats, get too far ahead and build their own infrastructure, because I think that's detrimental to the overall development and the adoption of electric boats.
Don't you think it forces the rest of the industry to follow, having one company that drives ahead and don't care about it? Can it be?
I mean, yes and no, but at the same time, if you compare the boating industry to the car industry, it's so much smaller. You can always discuss how many are there room for, and I think the last thing you want as an industry is to allow someone to get so far ahead that the others, I'm not going to say give up, but the others just feel, oh, the race is over, kind of. So I think we need to learn from the car industry, but like you said, we need to get more people in the room and decide that this needs to happen. How do we make it happen, short term, long term, and how do we finance it? Because it's not going to be profitable to run electric boat charging stations for a long time.
Good point there. I think it needs to be a collaboration in the end for everybody to survive.
I mean, this whole switch is collaboration. That's what it's all about.
That could actually be the last famous word for this show, but it's not going to be. Before, we have something more we need to do. We need to do the sunshine. Are you ready for that?
Okay.
Yeah, cool. So if you would like to give sunshine to an initiative, a person, or an organization that we should make sure that everybody knows about, which one would that be?
Sunshine.
I think in our world, it's what's called SSRS, Sjöräddningssällskapet, the Swedish Sea Rescue Society. I think what they do is absolutely amazing. It's volunteer work. It's funded by donations, and not only are they, doing a lot of work that I think we should expect our authorities to do, but they actually do it better, and they collaborate with the Coast Guard and the naval police and so on, and they're absolutely amazing people.
I proudly wear their logo on the boat.
Awesome.
Yeah. They are really interesting organization and setup. And as you said, it's amazing that so much is run from voluntary basis in that.
They actually rescued that woman from the mine.
Yeah. No, they are doing amazing work. I cheer them.
And they're also on a path to becoming fossil free.
There you go.
Which is absolutely super cool.
That is absolutely super cool. So check them out if you didn't know about them. This is an international crowd, but I think that there is lessons to be learned internationally of how they actually do work.
Definitely.
We have a proud way of working in Sweden with a lot of voluntary work in these kind of things. And I think that there are a lot to be learned from that, definitely. We'll, of course, put the link in the YouTube channel so you can check it out. We're moving to kind of summarizing this. You already had your famous last words, but you have a chance now to do kind of a summary if you want to give to the audience listening here now. What do you want them to bring with them from the conversation we had today?
I think the important thing to bring from this is to understand that the way we boat today isn't sustainable, but there are ways to fix it right here, right now. It's not about waiting for electric boats to become mainstream. Make the shift. right now?
That can also be the last famous words, and I'm going to go for that. Thank you very much, Karl-Oskar, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I so much look forward fueling my boat with you.
You're most welcome.
And
I'll see what I can do about discounts.
Yeah, I will do it even if it costs me more, because I do believe that you are on a path of actually making a very important step within the marine industry.
We think so too.
Yeah, and I support that, and so do we at The Switch. Just to make sure, check it out. We'll put the links for you, and so that everybody can check it out afterwards as well. But thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you.
Likewise, likewise.
Good. Well, that was a pure pleasure to talk to someone who has both solutions for now, what you and I can do already tomorrow when we're out on our boat, but also who has a vision of what we need to do to change the industry. Because I do believe that it takes more than one company, one initiative to actually change all of these behaviors that we do have. So with that said, I think that Fossil Free Marine are really doing a good job, and I hope that we can actually be a part of collecting these people to start talking about what we need to do to have a sustainable boating industry so that we all can enjoy that boat ride a little bit extra. If you enjoyed this a little bit extra, then make sure to share this episode to a friend or a colleague that really wants more education and entertainment within the renewable. But also like us and make sure to subscribe to The Switch, Not Another Podcast, so that you and I together can be a part of it. Now, until next time we meet, take care of yourself, and if you can, someone else. See ya!